My friends, I stand before you today with a message of hope, of strength, and of divine assurance. In the journey of life, we face trials, we experience struggles, and there are moments when it feels like the weight of the world is upon us. But I want you to hear this truth loud and clear today. God's plan is greater than your struggles. Whatever you're facing, whatever mountains you're climbing, know this. Our God is bigger. Our God is greater. And His purpose for your life will never be thwarted. In those moments of hardship, when you feel lost and alone, remember this. His hand is upon you, guiding you through. Trust in His plan, for He is with you every step of the way. Let us look to Him now. For He is the strength we need in our weakness and the hope we need in our despair. God's plan is unfailing, and it is a truth that offers immense comfort when we find ourselves facing the difficulties of life. Life is full of unexpected twists and turns, and at times it may feel as though we are wandering in the dark, unsure of where we are headed. In these moments, it is natural to question the purpose of our struggles, and even question if there is any purpose to the hardships we face at all. But the unshakable truth is that God's plan for each of us is unwavering and will not fail no matter what trials we encounter. This plan is not merely an afterthought or something that fluctuates based on the circumstances around us. It is a divine blueprint that was set in motion long before we were even born, and it is a plan that will always come to fruition. In Scripture, we are reminded time and time again of God's sovereignty and His ability to work all things together for good. Romans 8:28 declares, "And we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love Him, who have been called according to His purpose." This verse is a powerful testament to the fact that God is always at work, even in the most difficult moments of our lives. When we are struggling, it can feel like our world is falling apart, but God is still at work orchestrating every piece of the puzzle in His perfect timing. His plan is far greater than our understanding, and even though we may not see it in the moment, we can trust that He is making everything work together for a purpose that will ultimately benefit us. The idea of God's plan being unfailing brings us peace because we realize that nothing in this world can derail His divine will. Our struggles may be painful, but they are not the end of the story. In fact, they are often part of the process of fulfilling His plan. Consider the story of Joseph in the Bible. Joseph was betrayed by his brothers, sold into slavery, and imprisoned for a crime he did not commit. From a human perspective, it seemed as though his life was spiraling into disaster. But God had a greater plan for Joseph. What seemed like a series of unfortunate events were actually the steps that led Joseph to a place of leadership, where he was able to save his family and an entire nation from famine. Joseph's story is a reminder that God's plan is never thwarted by our circumstances. Even when things seem bleak, He is still working behind the scenes, preparing us for the greater purpose He has in store for us. It is important to note that God's plan is not based on our limited understanding or our desire for comfort. We are creatures bound by time, and we often measure success and happiness by the standards of this world. But God's plan transcends these fleeting measures of success. He sees the bigger picture, the eternal picture, one that we may not fully grasp. While we may desire immediate relief or answers to our struggles, God is more concerned with shaping us into the people He created us to be. His plan for us is about more than our comfort. It is about our transformation. It is about refining our character, teaching us to rely on Him, and preparing us to fulfill the purpose He has placed in our hearts. When we encounter difficulties, it can be easy to lose sight of God's ultimate plan. We may feel as though we are wandering aimlessly or that our efforts are in vain, but the truth is that God's plan is always unfolding, even when we can't see it. His plan is not limited by our current understanding or by the obstacles in our path. As the psalmist writes in Psalm 139:16, "All the days ordained for me were written in your book before one of them came to be." Before we were even born, God had already planned every step of our lives. This knowledge should bring us a profound sense of peace, knowing that we are not left to navigate this world on our own. He is with us, guiding us, and His plan is always in motion, even when we can't see it. It is also essential to recognize that God's plan is perfect even when we don't understand it. We may not always agree with the path He has set before us or the timing in which events unfold, but we can take comfort in knowing that His plan is always for our good, even when we can't immediately see how. Proverbs 3:5 and 6 encourages us to trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways submit to Him, and He will make your paths straight. Trusting in God's plan requires us to surrender our own understanding and accept that His wisdom far exceeds our own. There may be moments when we are called to walk through seasons of pain and uncertainty, but we can rest in the knowledge that God's plan is greater than anything we could have imagined for ourselves. Furthermore, God's plan is not just about us individually. It is a plan that involves the whole body of believers, and it extends to the world. Our struggles are often interconnected with the struggles of others. In the midst of our own trials, God may be working to use our experiences to encourage, uplift, and serve those around us. As we lean into His plan, we become part of something much greater than ourselves, something eternal. Our individual pain and suffering are not meaningless. They have a purpose within God's grand design. Even when our struggles seem overwhelming, we must hold on to the truth that God's plan is unfailing. He will not abandon us in the midst of our difficulties, and His purpose for us will not be derailed by our hardships. It is in these moments of struggle that we are called to trust more deeply in His wisdom, to lean more fully on His strength, and to surrender our own understanding to His perfect will. His plan is greater than any challenge we face, and it will come to fruition no matter what. When we hold fast to this truth, we begin to see our struggles not as obstacles, but as opportunities. Opportunities to grow in faith, to trust more fully, and to witness firsthand the unshakable nature of God's plan. In the end, no matter the trials we face, we can rest assured that God's plan will always prevail. For He is faithful, and His purpose will never fail. Struggles shape us in ways that we often fail to recognize in the midst of our pain. We tend to see challenges as disruptions, things that get in the way of our happiness or goals. But in reality, they are the very things that mold our character, strengthen our faith, and prepare us for the purpose God has laid out for us. When we face difficult times, it is easy to focus on the discomfort and the uncertainty. However, these struggles are not in vain. They are part of a divine process, a refining fire that works in us to produce something greater. The Bible is full of stories of individuals who faced tremendous struggles, yet those struggles were ultimately instrumental in God's plan for their lives. Think of the Israelites wandering in the desert for 40 years. To the Israelites, it must have seemed like an endless and senseless journey. They questioned their leaders, their circumstances, and even God's presence in the midst of their suffering. Yet God used that time to refine them, to strip away their dependence on anything other than Him. The wilderness experience was not just about hardship, it was about transformation. The people of Israel were being prepared for the promised land, but they had to be shaped spiritually and emotionally for the responsibility that awaited them. In the same way, our struggles are not random occurrences. God uses them to teach us lessons that we could not learn in times of comfort or ease. In James 1:2-4, and we are reminded, consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance. Let perseverance finish its work so that you may be mature and complete, not lacking anything. These verses remind us that struggles, though painful, serve a purpose. They test our faith, and in the process, they help us grow stronger. Perseverance is developed in the midst of adversity, and through that perseverance, we become more mature, more steadfast in our walk with God. It is in the most difficult moments that our faith is tested, refined, and ultimately strengthened. When we consider the process of refining gold, it is an apt metaphor for the way our struggles shape us. Gold is placed in a fire where it is heated to extreme temperatures. The impurities rise to the surface, and the goldsmith removes them, leaving only pure gold behind. This process is not easy for the gold, just as the struggles we face are not easy for us. But it is through this intense refining process that the gold becomes more valuable. Similarly, our struggles expose the impurities in our hearts and lives. Pride, selfishness, impatience, fear. As we endure these trials, God removes these impurities and refines us into the people He has called us to be. The refining process is not quick. It takes time, patience, and endurance. Just as gold cannot be purified in an instant, our character cannot be fully shaped without undergoing the process of trial and tribulation. God knows exactly what we need and when we need it. Sometimes we may wonder why our struggles seem to last so long, but God is working in us every step of the way. He is not in a hurry to finish the work He has begun in us, because He knows the value of a life that has been tested and refined. It is in these moments that we learn to rely on Him more fully, to trust Him more deeply, and to walk with greater humility. Our struggles also teach us dependence. When everything in our lives seems to be falling apart, we are forced to confront our limitations and our need for God. This is not a sign of weakness, it is a sign of growth. When we are in the midst of hardship, we realize that we cannot control everything and that we are not in charge of our own destiny. This realization brings us to a place of surrender, where we learn to trust in God's plan rather than relying on our own understanding or ability. It is only when we recognize our own weakness that we are able to experience God's strength in a more profound way. In Corinthians 12:9, Paul speaks of this divine strength when he writes, "But He said to me, my grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. Therefore I will boast all the more gladly of my weaknesses, so that the power of Christ may rest upon me." This verse reveals the paradox of the Christian faith. It is in our weakness that God's power is most evident. When we are weak, when we are struggling, that is when we are most in need of God's strength. And it is in these moments that He is able to show Himself in ways we may not have recognized otherwise. Struggles also teach us to rely on God's timing. In our fast-paced world, we want things to happen quickly. We want relief from our struggles right now. And when things don't go according to our timeline, it can be frustrating. But God's timing is perfect. He knows exactly when we need to go through certain struggles and how long we need to endure them. Often, we want to rush through the discomfort, but if we did, we would miss out on the lessons and growth that are only possible through perseverance. God's timing is always perfect, and His plan unfolds in the way that will bring about the greatest good in our lives. We also learn compassion through our struggles. When we go through hard times, we develop a deeper understanding of the pain and suffering of others. It is easy to be distant from the struggles of others when we haven't experienced them ourselves, but when we are in the trenches of hardship, we become more empathetic, more willing to come alongside others who are struggling. The Apostle Paul writes in 2 Corinthians 1:3 and 4, "Praise be to the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, the Father of compassion and the God of all comfort, who comforts us in all our troubles, so that we can comfort those in any trouble with the comfort we ourselves receive from God." Our struggles are not just for our own growth. They enable us to be a source of comfort and encouragement to others who are facing their own battles. As we endure our struggles, we begin to see them through a different lens. We realize that they are not just obstacles to overcome, they are opportunities for growth. Our struggles are the tools that God uses to refine us, strengthen us, and prepare us for the greater work He has for us. It is through the pain and difficulty that we become more like Christ. The Apostle Peter writes in 1 Peter 1:6-7, "In all this you greatly rejoice, though now for a little while you may have had to suffer grief in all kinds of trials. These have come so that the proven genuineness of your faith, of greater worth than gold, which perishes even though refined by fire, may result in praise, glory, and honor when Jesus Christ is revealed." Our struggles, while difficult, are part of the process of refining our faith, and in the end, they will bring glory to God. In the midst of our struggles, it is easy to forget that they are shaping us, but if we can remember that each challenge is an opportunity for growth, we can face them with a different perspective. God is at work in every season of life, and even in the darkest times, He is using our struggles to prepare us for what He has ahead. Each hardship, each trial, each moment of difficulty is part of the greater story God is writing in our lives. Strength in faith is not a passive thing. It is something that requires active participation, trust, and a willingness to depend on God even when we do not fully understand what He is doing in our lives. In times of struggle, it can be difficult to see beyond the immediate pain or uncertainty, and that's when our faith is most tested. But it is precisely in these moments of hardship that God's strength is most apparent. We are called to lean on Him in our weakness, to trust Him even when the road ahead seems unclear, and to find our strength in His promises rather than in our own ability. The Bible is filled with stories of people who found strength in their faith during times of great difficulty. Take, for example, the story of David. As a young boy, David was chosen by God to be the king of Israel. But before he could step into that role, he faced numerous challenges. One of the most famous of these challenges was his encounter with Goliath. When David stepped into the battlefield, he was not a seasoned warrior, nor was he equipped with the traditional armor of a soldier. He was just a shepherd boy with only a slingshot and his faith in God. But David knew that the battle did not belong to him, it belonged to God. His faith gave him the strength to face the giant that everyone else was too afraid to confront. In 1 Samuel 17:45, David boldly declared, "You come against me with sword and spear, but I come against you in the name of the Lord Almighty." David's strength was not in his own skill or strength. It was in his faith in God. His victory was a testament to the power of faith, showing that when we place our trust in God, He empowers us to face the giants in our lives, no matter how impossible they may seem. This kind of faith is not the kind of faith that simply hopes for the best or wishes for circumstances to change. It is a deep, unshakable trust in the character and promises of God. Faith is the assurance that even when we cannot see how things will work out, God is still in control and will work all things together for our good. Hebrews 11:01 defines faith as confidence in what we hope for and assurance about what we do not see. It is in those times when we cannot see the way forward that faith becomes most crucial. It is in those times when we cannot see the way forward that God is with us. Strength in faith also means recognizing that our own strength is insufficient. When we rely on our own abilities and resources, we quickly realize how limited we truly are. This is where true faith begins, when we come to the realization that we cannot handle everything on our own and that we need God's strength to carry us through. In 2 Corinthians 12:9, Paul shares a powerful revelation that God gave him in the midst of his own struggles. But he said to me, "My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. Therefore I will boast all the more gladly of my weaknesses, so that the power of Christ may rest upon me." Paul's weakness was not something to be ashamed of. It was an opportunity for God's power to be made evident. It is in our weakest moments that we can experience the full strength of God's grace. We come to understand that it is not about our own abilities, but about relying on God's power to get us through. Strength in faith also requires patience. We often want immediate results, immediate answers, and immediate relief from our struggles. But faith teaches us to wait on God's timing. In Isaiah 40:31, we are told, "But those who hope in the Lord will renew their strength. They will soar on wings like eagles. They will run and not grow weary. They will walk and not be faint." This waiting on the Lord is not a passive waiting. It is an active trust in His perfect timing. Strength in faith means believing that God is at work even when we do not see immediate results. It means trusting that He is preparing us, refining us, and working in us even when the process feels slow. Faith teaches us to wait with expectation, knowing that God's plan is always unfolding, and in His time He will provide what we need. In addition to patience, strength in faith also involves perseverance. The Christian life is not always easy, and we will inevitably face hardships and difficulties. But we are called to persevere, not because we are strong in ourselves, but because God is faithful to carry us through. James 1:12 says, "Blessed is the one who perseveres under trial, because having stood the test, that person will receive the crown of life that the Lord has promised to those who love him." Perseverance is the result of a faith that is deeply rooted in the knowledge that God will bring us through, no matter how difficult the journey may be. It is the willingness to keep moving forward, even when we don't understand why we are going through certain trials, because we trust that God is faithful and that He will never leave us. One of the most profound ways in which our faith strengthens us is in the way it transforms our perspective. When we place our trust in God, we begin to see our struggles not as insurmountable obstacles, but as opportunities for growth. Our faith gives us the ability to look beyond our present circumstances and see the bigger picture of God's purpose. Romans 8:18 says, "I consider that our present sufferings are not worth comparing with the glory that will be revealed in us." Strength in faith means trusting that no matter what we face, God's glory is greater than our struggles, and that our suffering is not in vain, it is temporary, and it is preparing us for something far greater than we can imagine. As we strengthen our faith, we also grow in our ability to encourage others. When we experience God's strength in our own lives, we are better equipped to come alongside others who are facing similar struggles. 2 Corinthians 1:04 reminds us that God comforts us in our troubles so that we can comfort others with the comfort we have received. The strength we gain from our faith is not just for our own benefit. It is meant to be shared with others. As we lean on God in our struggles, we become living testimonies of His faithfulness. And we are able to offer hope and encouragement to those who are walking through their own trials. Faith also allows us to experience peace in the midst of chaos. When the world around us is filled with uncertainty, faith anchors us in the truth that God is in control. Philippians 4:6-7 tells us, "Do not be anxious about anything, but in every situation by prayer and petition with thanksgiving, present your request to God, and the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus." This peace does not come from our circumstances. It comes from knowing that God is with us and that He is in control. Strength in faith gives us the confidence to face the storms of life with peace in our hearts, knowing that God is our refuge and our strength, an ever-present help in times of trouble. In the end, strength in faith is about understanding that our relationship with God is the source of everything we need. It is not about our own abilities or efforts. It is about trusting in God's power and His provision. When we lean into our faith, we are empowered to overcome challenges, to persevere in difficult times, and to experience the peace that comes from knowing that God is with us every step of the way. Strength in faith allows us to face life's challenges with courage, knowing that we are never alone. God's strength is always available to us, and as we place our trust in Him, we are empowered to do far more than we could ever do on our own. In conclusion, we must remember that God's plan for our lives is far greater than any struggle we face. Our difficulties, though challenging, are not without purpose. They shape us, refine us, and prepare us for the amazing future He has designed. Through our trials, God is growing our faith, teaching us to rely on His strength rather than our own, and transforming us into the people He created us to be. It is in our weaknesses that His power is made perfect, and in our struggles that His plan unfolds. As we trust in His timing and lean on His grace, we can have the assurance that no matter how hard life may seem, God is with us, and His purpose for our lives will prevail. Let us hold fast to our faith, knowing that the strength we find in Him will carry us through every challenge and ultimately lead us to the fulfillment of His greater plan.